not too long ago, I had a guy, he sent me a message, and a really nice guy, an elderly gentleman, and he just talked about like the videos and how much he enjoys watching them. But then he talked about, and I think this guy grew up around the Vernal, Utah area, and he had mentioned that, you know, like throughout his life, he'd always heard about these Spanish sites, like Spanish mines and smelters and all that kind of stuff. And he was always real curious about it, and he always wanted to go out and look for that stuff, or at least see that stuff in real life. And nobody he knew or associated with, you know, knew anything about that stuff, and he just kind of never followed up on it. And then now that he's older, and I think he has some health problems, and he can't get around anymore, you know, he can't go out hiking or anything like that. And he basically, you know, he said he has a lot of regrets that he never went out and kind of did this stuff, like the stuff you see in these videos. And it was always on his bucket list, but he never did it. And, you know, that kind of tugged on my heartstrings, you know, and I felt bad for the guy, and I can definitely relate to that. And so I was thinking, like, you know, the spots I film and you see in these videos, these are very remote areas, and you know, they're secret due to the nature of the sites. But I was thinking, like, what can I do? And he's not the only one who's ever reached out to me like that, but I know there's a lot of people, you know, in those situations where they're getting up there in age and they can't hike around looking for the stuff, but they'd at least like to be able to go see something in real life. And it just so happens I was doing research on CatFaces, and if you don't know what CatFaces are, I'm going to show you. And even if you're not interested in CatFaces or their origins, you'll still enjoy the pictures I'm going to show you. They're actually pretty cool. But it just so happens that there's an area where I can show you an old Spanish mine, and I can show you CatFaces. And everything we're going to talk about in this video, you can drive to. These are literally located right on the side of a forest road. And so it's a perfect opportunity to do a video, kind of like killing two birds with one stone, and where I can show you how you can actually go to an old Spanish mine and look at it, take some pictures, take the wife, take the grandkids, and you can see these CatFaces. And I'm going to show you how to get to these areas. They're very easy to get to. They're all on the exact same road, so it's like one-stop shopping. It's a very beautiful drive up over the mountain pass. We're going to be in an area called Blind Stream. And just if you do this, if you go on this route, just make sure you have a four-wheel drive. It doesn't have to be like a serious off-road vehicle or anything like that. You know, it can be like a little SUV or something, but definitely you want to make sure you have four-wheel drive if you're going to go on this route. So I hope you enjoy this video, and if you have any questions or anything or need more specific directions, just leave me a comment down below. All right, this right here, this road in front of us, this is the road you take to get to the Stillwater Dam up in Rock Creek. And there's the dam right there. And then the road you're going to take to get to the sites we're going to today is up this road. It comes out in Hannah and Tabiona. And so this is it right here. You're just going to travel up this road. And this road is absolutely gorgeous. It'll take you all the way up and over the mountain pass. You'll come out in Hannah, Tabiona, and from there you can head south and connect back to Highway 40. And so right now I'm going to show you some pictures, and I'm going to explain to you who Shirl Atwood is. I want to express my thanks, first of all, to the Atwood family. They provided me with all of the pictures you're about to see. Cheryl Atwood, the man who I believe is responsible for creating all the CatFaces, he is the origin of the CatFaces you see throughout the Uintah Basin. Cheryl was born in 1935, and he passed away in 2009. He was an avid trapper and a hunter, and he also worked as a guide, and he would take people out on hunting trips to areas like the Book Cliffs. And off and on, he also worked in the oil field, and he was a lumberjack. his nickname among family and friends, he was known as Bobcat. And that's because he behaved like a bobcat when he's out exploring, and he'd go through canyons and up over the mountains. He was a natural adventurer. He was very adventurous. And that's how family and friends remember him even to this day. Not only was his nickname Bobcat, but he also had a pet bobcat. And he had caught 3 bobcat kittens. Their mother had died. And so he took them home and he raised them. 2 of the kittens ended up dying, but one of them lived well into adulthood. And his bobcat's name was Rufus, and that was one of his best buddies. He had a pet bobcat, and he would take the bobcat around with him everywhere, even in his vehicle. And people would see this crazy guy driving around with the bobcat, and they get all freaked out and everything, but he didn't care. That was his buddy, and where he went, his Rufus went with him. Shirl was a very passionate treasure hunter, and he traveled all throughout the Uintah Basin looking for Spanish treasure and Spanish artifacts and the Lost Worlds mine and all of that good stuff. When he would go to these areas, he would leave this mark, that's become known as the CatFace mark. In my lifetime, I found probably about 10. That's kind of a conservative estimate. It might be more than that, but I'd feel safe saying at least 10. I have friends that have found these CatFaces clear up in the wilderness area. One of my friends was up there, and he was following clues to a mine he was looking for, and he went into a rock outcropping. He looked up on the ceiling, and lo and behold, there was a CatFace carved into the rock in the ceiling. So you never know where you're going to find these at. But I'll tell you one thing, when you find a CatFace, pay attention, because there's probably something very interesting close by. When I was doing my research, the only thing I was uncertain about was it's been reported that these CatFace symbols have been found clear up in the Canadian Rockies all the way up into Alaska. That was the last piece of the puzzle I couldn't quite put together. And then one of the individuals who watches these videos, I'm not going to say his name because I don't have permission, but he reached out to me, and he saw one of the CatFaces in one of my videos, and it turns out he was very good friends with Cheryl Atwood. And that was really interesting, because he kind of told me some stories about Cheryl and explained some things for me, but they were really close friends back in the day. And Shirl ended up in Canada for personal reasons I'm not going to go into, because that's, his family's own business. But he did end up in Canada, and while in Canada, he did some trapping and hunting and prospecting. And so when he was up there in Canada, he also left these CatFaces, and people to this day are finding these mysterious CatFaces left by Mr. Shirl Atwood up in the Canadian Rockies. And then in his younger days, Shirl went up to Alaska, and at that time he had an 8mm camera. Shirl, thank goodness, he loved to take pictures, and so these pictures you're looking at, a lot of these were taken by Shirl or somebody with him, one of his buddies. But thank goodness he was a man who took a lot of photographs, so we have a lot of evidence of his memories and his discoveries. But on this 8mm film that's left over from his Alaska adventure, right on the film he wrote "Alaska on a Prayer." And the reason he wrote that is because he scraped together all of his money, and he wanted to go up to Alaska. He wanted to explore Alaska. And so he scraped together every little bit of money he could get, and he barely made it into Alaska. And he took an old beater all the way from the Uintah Basin clear up to Alaska. But he made it, and while in Alaska, he trapped, explored, hunted, did prospecting, and he did the same thing up there. When he would find places he was interested in or where he had camped, he would leave a CatFace. And so that's why people find the CatFace symbols all the way even up into remote Alaska. So a very interesting man, and just to think of all the adventures that he went on, and I would have loved to have been able to hang out with him and went on adventures with this guy. But you know, when he was doing his thing, I wasn't even born yet. But I kind of envision him as being like a modern day mountain man, modern day Jeremiah Johnson. So I hope this solves a lot of the curiosity and stuff like that we've all had at one point or another regarding these cat faces we find out in the middle of nowhere up in the Uintah Mountains and clear out to the Book Cliffs. This book that you're looking at right now, Early Spanish Treasure Signs and Symbols, this book was heavily used by treasure hunters back in the 1960s and the 1970s, during the same time that Shirl would have been very actively treasure hunting. And this book right here, this is a collector's item. My Uncle Dallas let me borrow this. And this book is over 60 years old, and it's signed by the author. So it's a very valuable book. And I'm hoping maybe someday Dallas will let me borrow this long term. Little hint to you, Dallas. But Cheryl would have been very familiar with this book, and that's why I wanted to use this book specifically when I was doing my research. And right here in this book, this is showing you different Indian symbols and their meanings. And pay very close attention to this symbol, these crossed arrows, and it means here, this place, friendship. You know, it kind of takes on that sort of meaning. So right here, this is the CatFace symbol. This is a symbol you find everywhere when you're out exploring up in the Uintah Mountains. And so, based on my understanding from my research, I think I've figured this out. So, you have an S for Shirl. You have an A for Atwood. You have the cat symbol, the two eyes, the whiskers, because his nickname was Bobcat. And then you have that Indian symbol, meaning, you know, I was here. And so how you would interpret this symbol is I, Shirl Atwood, also known as Bobcat, was here. And there you go. I asked the Atwood family if Shirl had ever found anything significant, something like the Lost Roads mine or a large Spanish cache or anything like that. And they said he found a lot of really cool stuff, smelters, tree carvings. He definitely found a lot of old mines, Spanish mines, but he never found the big one. He never found the Lost Roads mine or a large Spanish cache or anything like that, not to their knowledge. But he had a lot of great experiences. He had a very fulfilling life. He loved outdoors, and that's where he spent all of his time. And so really his memories and his experiences, for him, that was the treasure. But right here, you have another cat face. Whenever you find these, you need to take it serious, because Shirl found something significant and he marked it. And I'm gonna hook you guys up. I'm gonna give you a little adventure. Because of that cat face that you just saw, I was able to find a very cool old mine, a very rich and heavily mineralized mine. I'll show you footage of it here in just a second. So somewhere out here, not very far from where we are now, you'll find the same mine that you're about to see. So I'm giving you an adventure to go on. Bring your kids and do a little hiking. And it's not very far. It's close enough even a little kid could hike there. But here you are. It's right off the road. Look for this metal, find that cat face, and you'll find the mine. This is the old mine. And inside of here, you got some very beautiful mineralization taking place, especially with the quartz veins. I'll point them out, but when I get in there, I'm not going to do a lot of talking. when I'm in old mines like this that are unstable, I try to stay as quiet as I can. Just a word of advice. When you're in old mines and you come to something like this, and a lot of times you think that's the end of the mine, but it might not be. You might have a vertical shaft dropping straight down that's just been covered over by this debris. So be very careful. You gotta be careful where you walk. Look at all that beautiful quartz vein. Just absolutely gorgeous. These are called bug holes, and that's where you get the really dark brown quartz. That's what prospectors look for, is this right here, this bug hole. And that's where you usually get your gold, silver. You got another old bug hole here. See, they've hollowed this one out. Right now we're at the old mine site, but I just want to bring something to your attention. Something people usually don't think about is all these old roads that we have all up in the mountains, all over the West. At one time, these were trails, and these trails would have been used by game, Indians, the early Spanish miners, the mountain men. For example, this trail, it'll take you into the Duchesne River drainage. And then when you come to the other end, up here, and you go over the mountain pass, and it takes you into the Rock Creek drainage. But all these old explorers, the old cowboys, the sheep herders, all of those old timers, going way back to the time of the Indians, would have used this trail. And during the Great Depression, you had President Roosevelt, and he created the CC camps, the Civilian Conservation Corps. And it was a way to put men to work. And my great-grandfather worked in one of these camps. And my great-grandfather said that they were lucky and they were grateful to have those jobs. But during that time, that's when they built, they turned all these old trails into these roads that we enjoy today. And the same thing with many of the lakes that we have up here in the Uintah Mountains. And these camps were all over the country, but here in the Rocky Mountain states, they mainly built these roads, and they built our lakes, and they did projects like that. And the reason I bring this up is because you will find cool stuff next to these Forest Service roads. And the reason for that is because, you know, at one time this was just an ancient trail. At this old mine, just to kind of show you the geology real quick, you got a lot of, looks like limestone, real pretty. And then this right here, this is calcite crystals, and absolutely gorgeous. Very pretty stuff. And then you do have quartz, like right here, there's a quartz vein that goes down the side of the hill. So we're in an area that has a lot of mineralization, and that's what would have attracted these Spanish miners. See, I wasn't kidding when I said you can drive right to it. This right here, that is the old Spanish mine. And I'll tell you why I believe this was a Spanish mine. First, just a word of advice. If you ever find an old mine, when you're out hiking around or exploring, do not tell the Forest Service, do not tell the BLM. They will come and destroy it. You are under no legal or moral obligation to tell those guys about an old mine. And every time they destroy these old mines, they're destroying part of our history. And you have the shaft here, and if I remember right, when you go up and over that hill, there's some more diggings back in there. But I was doing research on a project up in this area, and part of this research, I was reading old United States Forest Service reports and documents, and they had a report, and if I remember right, it was dated 1982, somewhere right around there, and this mine was in that report. And the Forest Service, they wanted to come up here and seal off this mine for the public safety. And part of what the Forest Service has to do is they have to do a lot of research and go through all the archives, because they have to make sure that there's not an active claim on the mine. And then they want to see what the origins of the mine are. And this way, you know, so they can get somebody else to pay for it. But when they come to a really old mine and they exhaust all of their records and they can't find any historical evidence, they classify it as old and of unknown origins. And that's exactly how they have this old mine classified. So this mine's been here for a long time. And I just showed you some of the geology, so you know why the Spaniards were interested in it. You know, we got mineralization going on here. I explained the roads to you. So one time this would have been, you know, an ancient trail, and the Spaniards would have most definitely have used this trail when they were crossing from the Duchesne River drainage into the Rock Creek drainage and back and forth. But there's not much left of it. You got a little pocket right there, but that doesn't go anywhere. But this is it. It used to be a little more open, but you can kind of still see there where it drops down, and here, all of this, the Forest Service would have done. In that report I was reading, and this is back in the 80s, the mine had pretty much already collapsed. And so the Forest Service deemed, you know, they didn't want to spend the money coming up here and dynamiting it shut. And they figured it's already almost all the way collapsed. And so it wasn't, you know, a risk to public safety. But I imagine they came up here anyways and backfilled it with this stuff. But here you go. This is a Spanish mine. And many, many years ago, the Spanish miners would have been in here doing their work. And I imagine veins, back then they had to work with very high grade veins. They didn't have the chemical processes and all that like we do nowadays to work with low grade ore. And so they would have followed the vein and pretty much followed it until it pinched out. And at that time they would have abandoned the mine. And that's probably what happened here. But there are other diggings like this in this area, so they were following this same vein. But here you go.